Many of you have worked with Linda with the Authentic Self course. At some point it would be advantageous for all of you to do so. Come to an understanding of what it means to live authentically. As an individual, some people erroneously believe that to live authentically means to allow personality whims and desires and selfish motivations to control your life, to drive your life urges. But it's really about how does one as an individual, one as one, allow the animating spirit that is the authentic self to be able to live in a way that it is liberated and able to express its knowing and its understanding, to live life in such a way to allow that indwelling spirit to be unfettered by the mortal coil. And one of the things which is not really often taken into account is the inauthenticity of pretense. You know, most people live a life of pretense, a life of pretending. And you certainly will have to assimilate the society, the civilization that you live in, and come to an understanding of how to operate within social convention and the laws of the land, of course, in a way which allows you to not run foul of the local constabulary and so on. But of course, if you live your life in, of and for love, then you will find yourself easily operating within the laws of the land, probably much more so than the average person. And to live with the ease and the grace of spirit means to live the truth of accepting, tolerating the choices of others without judgment, whilst also setting appropriate boundaries around love in your life, because you all deserve to experience a life of love. Certain things, when accepted, mean that you are not going to experience a life of love. So one must learn to not accept, to not tolerate that which is unacceptable. And that may be in terms of abuse or simply incompatibility with certain ones, or even a vocation that may have served you in the past but perhaps no longer serves you in the now. One of the real problems with living an authentic life, and one of the things which really gets in the way of moving forward on the spiritual path is this experience of pretense. And a lot of people just take pretense for granted in the name of being spiritual. But I would say that it's more about cowardice than being spiritual. Pretense, pretending. But I don't pretend about anything. You might be surprised how much you pretend. How much you pretend to be a certain way. You might pretend that you really don't hate your in-laws. You might pretend that you don't really like one of your children more than one of the others. You might pretend that you really aren't insanely irritated by your partner's laugh. You probably pretend about a lot of things. To the point that you forget that you're even pretending about that. It just becomes normal to act as though you don't hate your in-laws or whatever. If you're really honest with yourself, there's probably lots of things that you pretend about. And see, that's not being authentic. And that to some degree affects your ability to be in discernment, because it affects your bullshit barometer. Because if you pretend for long enough that you don't really have a problem with something, and that problem may be because one of your in-laws might be a really horrible person. They really might be. And you really might not want them to have anything to do with your children because of the influence that they have. Or it might just be some stupid egoic reaction. And I'm not really talking about stupid egoic reactions. So when you pretend in that way where you override some deep knowing within yourself, you desensitise yourself to that which is not love. You perhaps desensitise yourself to that which is abusive within the context of love. But you also lose sight of the truth in many ways, living a life of pretense. You might pretend that you really get on well with your boss. You might pretend that you agree with some of the policies and procedures at your workplace, which really cause you to feel uncomfortable. You may be involved in some sort of religious group, indeed a religion, and you might pretend that a policy of not allowing contraception, even when it means the death of some woman in Africa whose husband has AIDS, you might pretend that that's okay. You might pretend that that doesn't mean that there's something fundamentally whacked up at the core of that religion. Because that's not about love. Of course that's not about love, and religion's supposed to be about love. So there's lots of things that you can pretend about, and it desensitizes you to what love really is when you live a life of pretense. So what's the alternative? Well, the alternative is to learn patience, being without expectation, in other words. And to practice acceptance in, of and for love. To accept the things you cannot change, and to resolve to be a living example, a living revelation of change, to patiently work towards change in that which is unacceptable. Whether it is some policy or procedure of the land or of the world or of the local religious beliefs or of one of your in-laws. But you need to still be really honest with yourself, really brutally honest with yourself. Can I lend my energy in this way as things currently are? We don't live in a perfect world, that's true. Yet we see examples of kindness and love and consideration in small ways and in large ways, with individuals, with groups, with governments, on a daily basis. It's one thing to actively support something, perhaps by being the member of a congregation or a group, and actively supporting and contributing energy to something which you're only pretending you are able to tolerate. It's another thing to give tacit support, to just go along with things and just to accept things and do nothing about it, say nothing about it. It's quite another thing to set a boundary and say, well, wow, I'd like to live in a world which was about unconditional love and above in each and every moment. And I know the world isn't, but some things just aren't acceptable. They just aren't acceptable. I don't want my children, my grandchildren to grow up in a world that still has this expression of fear, of control, of power for its own sake. In it, I just don't want that. So I can't, in good conscience, give my energy to that in any way, shape or form. So what am I prepared to accept as far as that which is not love? It's not about pretending that something's okay. The phenomena doesn't change if you pretend that you really don't hate your boss, or if you learn to tolerate and accept out of love. And you know, maybe if you do that and you don't judge that person and you see the good and the wonderful things in there, and you hold a presence of love which is about helping everyone in the workplace to come to an understanding of how to express love in each and every moment without judgment. Maybe you do need to speak up a little more often. So, look, we could look at doing it this way. You might be in need of the ability to be able to offer your suggestions and your ideas and let other people take the credit for it. for the sake of more love being grounded and expressed in the workplace. But pretending is not the same as being in acceptance. Pretending is not the same as being in tolerance, in understanding, in equanimity. And if you let go of that pretending, which is almost always about cowardice, you'll find that some of the nagging questions simply resolve themselves. It becomes obvious that which is acceptable. Often things, when you stop pretending, you realise, well, that's really not such a big thing. Instead of putting all that energy into pretending about something that annoys you or aggravates you, when you stop doing that, you can often see the good, in inverted commas, in people. Wow, I never saw that before because I was just concentrating on the aggravation. And of course you're just feeding those perhaps negative character flaws in the person through your pretense. In a sense, you're expecting that person to continue to be the same way. You're expecting that person to be the same way. So, I want you to be really honest with the things that you're pretending about. And look at how you can bring the light of patience and tolerance and acceptance and surrender. Because if you really can't change something, you need to accept it and surrender to the experience with appropriate boundaries. And then just get on with your life. Let life happen without you having an opinion about it, being annoyed about it. So it's one thing to have a certain amount of authenticity as an individual. It's quite another then to express that authenticity in, of and for love in your greater sphere. And that's what I'm talking about here. So where is your pretense? Where are you pretending? You might be pretending that your feet really are okay and you actually hate them. Or you might hate your breasts, but you pretend that you're okay with that. Or you might be pretending that you're okay with your weight. That's not the same as self-acceptance and self-love. You know, when you're projecting pretense over yourself, lying to yourself, deluding yourself, then the four pillars, the four foundational pillars of self-worth, belonging, uniqueness and self-determination that we build our sense of self-identity upon is full of pretense. And if your foundation is full of pretense, full of lies, you know what you attract into your experience? Liars. And deception and so on. That's probably not a good idea. So where are you pretending? Be honest with yourself. and really look at that pretense as a major guide in your life as to what the next thing is that you really need to transform into love in your life. And you'll make choices about what the priority is for the next step in your spiritual evolution truly wisely. If you just accept things, or you think you accept things by pretending that something's okay, that massively changes your radar around what the next thing is, what's the most important thing within the context of granting and expressing love, what the next thing is that you need to be working on. So pretense is not a great idea as far as authenticity is concerned. So what I'd like to do is to help you to come to an understanding of your pretense, to see your pretense in a new way, to get to know yourself in a new way, to get to know your relationship with the world, with everything within your personal sphere in a new way, without pretense, but with acceptance, with appropriate spiritual boundaries, with surrender and with patience. And see how that changes your life. This can make a huge difference in the experience of your living. So I hope that you have the courage to choose to be willing to allow yourself to see where you are deluding yourself with pretense. And I hope that you get a lot out of this experience of me working with you to shine this light onto where pretense exists in your life. Any insights or feelings or musings around what I'm sharing? Jen?
Yes, of course, I did the false bravado. The false bravado was a big pretense for me that you've been working with me for some years now. And this morning I found another aspect of it where I was in pretense, and it was an aspect of that false bravado, everything's okay. And normally I wouldn't have said anything. I actually put my hand up and shared about what it was. It was unbelievably liberating. It just
Fantastic, fantastic.
unraveled all this stuff and a lot of feeling stuff that came up. And
Wonderful.
yeah, it was.
Wonderful. The really profound, transformative experiences in our lives are often those really simple things. Yeah.
So what a waste of energy.
Yeah.
Holding that pretense that wasn't even who I was.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Being nice to people who I really don't feel I like. Put a mask on.
Yeah. Yeah. You can be pleasant to people, but pretending that you like them is actually a different thing. And that can actually eat away at you at soul level. Yeah.
It's just wanting to be liked, that's all. Not looking for approval outside,
Right.
not inside.
Right.
I have a couple of examples.
Mm-hmm.
One from years ago and then one more recent. When I was still the organisation I used to be with, I was in a position where I used to have to, well, there's lots of things, but I was in a position where I was giving permission for people to come on courses or not, and things like that. And some of the rules were just really, really, stupid. And some of them were good, but some of them were just stupid. And I just couldn't bridge the gap. I mean, the pretense of bridging the gaps, just like stretching myself, and the point came when I left that was I just couldn't bridge those gaps anymore. I couldn't hold that pretense in those situations.
Mm-hmm.
And then recently, when I started to teach or share some of my experience with meditation, to some of the people in the group, I was feeling really challenged by that. And people were saying, well, you know, you've got a lot to offer with this, you know. And it's like, I had this pretense, of like the false modesty pretense, that I didn't. And Ben really helped me with that. And I just had to let it go. And, you know, I really started to enjoy myself.
Great.
And
Great. You do have a lot to offer.
And well, but I had to let go of that.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
So it was really, you know, letting it go in a different sense, letting go of a different kind of pretense.
Yeah. It's not to say that there's not a place for pretending.
It's fine lines between pretense and tolerance. You know, are you being tolerant or pretending?
Moderation. You know, if you're in a situation where you have to pretend about something in order to avert a global war happening, that's probably a wise use of pretending. You know, look, faking the occasional orgasm is probably, can be a good thing. You know, because you're so close and you are enjoying yourself anyway, so it's like, and he's, you know, he's trying, and, you know, and that was good anyway. But if you start to do it too often, you find yourself more often than not, you're faking an orgasm, well, that's taking pretending way too far in a self-abnegating way. So there's a place for pretending, and pretending can be fun. You know, there's a place for dressing up and looking nice and going to a concert or going out for a nice candlelit dinner or something, and pretending that you're the king and the queen for the night. And but if you do that sort of thing regularly, habitually, in a way to avoid the reality of your life, your existence, or in a way that you're trying to hold on to the glory of your last life, or in a way that is really about laziness, because there's lots of things you could change in your life if you really wanted to, but you're too lazy and you have this exaggerated sense of entitlement, so it's easier just to pretend that I'm great or grand and look down my nose at everyone in self-righteous condemnation. And you know, that's not a wonderful idea. That's not wisdom in practice. So I want you to be really honest. Really honest with yourself. Not only about what you're pretending about, but what are the motivations for that pretense. And we'll use this as a process, as a journey of self-inquiry, of self-discovery, and a process of liberating, of liberation for you, in, of, and for love. Yeah? I wouldn't suggest faking orgasms unless you almost always have an orgasm, right? I just want to be clear on that, you know. My examples sometimes can be misconstrued. Okay, so we're clear on that?
Yes.
How are you feeling about that?
Curious.
Curious. Great, great. Yeah, great. You get what I mean? So, and this is important. This is a really important thing. And it might seem a little trite almost, or it's like, but, or...
I'm just saying, are you kidding?
Yeah, it's an important thing, because you can... You start pretending as a coping mechanism fairly young, and then you start to forget just how much you pretend and how much you use pretense, and you can lose yourself in a really unwholesome way, which is really to your detriment as a soul journeying through eternity. And it can make it hard for you to see the truth. It certainly means that you're not loving the truth. It's not to say that you can't love the truth and prize the truth and occasionally go grit your teeth and pretend about something, because you know that the consequences would be dire if you don't, and that could only be about not love, living in a life where the egos around us constantly create new universes of reality from moment to moment. There's inevitably going to be those sorts of moments, but that's got to be a rare thing, not something that you just do as a matter of course out of laziness, foolishness or selfishness. So this can be a really, really profound experience of getting to know oneself. And the look may not be great, but what you'll do, hopefully, is gain all these insights and go, wow, I can see now why that keeps happening in my life, and I am settling for that, and I am accepting that, I am giving tacit support to that, and wow, that really doesn't sit well for me spiritually, that I'm giving my energy to that, and I can see that I'm letting energy leak away by allowing that to happen. Well, so there's lots of things that I need to review, and there's certain things that I need to shake up, and there's maybe some changes that I need to make so that I can be in my integrity. Pretense, when it's used with a motivation, an intention which is not about love, it really, really gets in the way of living an integrated life, having an integrated body, mind and spirit. So this is a wonderful opportunity, and the energies are perfect around this time of the year to have a really good look at this, and things start to really stick out, and you go, oh wow, and you may laugh and smile at yourself and just go, oh, I just don't choose to do that. Or it may be very difficult to let go of a certain pretense, because if you let go of a certain pretense, you'll no longer be able to tolerate certain things in your life, and that things might have to change. But if you're going to live in, of and for love, for yourself and those people that you love, then sometimes that's necessary. Yeah?
Yes, been a big thing in my life where I was pretended to like what others like, so I'd fit in.
Uh-huh.
And, just not really wanting to do it, or after a while, it was wrong.
Uh-huh.
And you just end up in all sorts of a mess,
You do.
It's just not nice.
Yeah.
Just pretend.
Yeah. And well, that's not being kind to yourself, and it's not really being kind to other people too, because you're lying to them.
And you blind yourself because you don't know what you like or what you want.
Yeah, so that you see your foundation then to some degree is based on a lie. Yeah. Choices and consequences, no real right or wrong, but yeah, I get what you mean.
Pretending not to be angry because you don't know how to express it.
Yeah, well, that can be really damaging to yourself. And then you also, of course, tend to be passive-aggressive, and you're radiating that anger in subtle ways, and the other person says, well, what's wrong with you? There's nothing wrong with me. I'm fine. But you're stewing about all these things that you haven't expressed. And that can really damage your own system, but it can also damage your relationships as well.
And then there was, like in the in the Inquisition when we actually did a lot of pretending, you know, just that we weren't who we were so that we didn't get burnt or whatever. And then we forgot though. We forgot that we were pretending. We're still carrying on like that.
We'll still act pretending like there is an Inquisition?
No, pretending that you're not who you are.
Right, yes.
The thing is sometimes there were times when
Yeah.
it was important to pretend, but not to forget that we were pretending. That was the biggest problem, is that we forget. We take on, even in this, we take on these pretending mechanisms and we just forget.
Yeah. That's very true. Yes, mate.
It feels quite liberating and exciting to like discern and to you know bring more truth here.
Yep.
You know, into your living.
Yeah.
You know, like, oh wow, this is the real truth. You know, so it's
Great.
it's really feels like that.
Great. Enjoy it. Have fun with it, because this is you being honest with yourself. And it's good practice for being honest with other people. But then again, having said that, never use the truth as a weapon. It's about creating outcomes of love and harmony and so forth. And it's not about using the truth as a weapon. Often the best thing to do is just keep your mouth shut, because it can only do harm and it can only create outcomes not of love. So timing is all important as well. Anyway, the timing's perfect for you to remember where you are pretending and to embrace more authenticity in your life. So I look forward to working with you over the next day or two and seeing what insights come from this.